Now, over the weekend, the world of boxing was hit with some sad news that legendary heavyweight boxer George Foreman had passed away at the age of 76, and the tributes have been flowing in here at talkSPORT.
Big George Foreman, everybody was frightened of him when he fought and everybody loved it. What a story, what a journey.
He is one of the iconic names of heavyweight boxing.
October of 68, I was an Olympic gold medalist.
George Foreman wins the gold medal of the 19th Olympiad in Mexico City.
I didn't know I was going to win an Olympic gold medal, and little did I know it would take up all of my life as it did.
I'm not sure we'll ever be able to see someone like Foreman again. He was really a one-off. Absolutely a one-off.
When he beat Joe Frazier.
Frazier is down for the 5th time in this fight.
And it was a staggering performance that Foreman literally lifted him off his feet. It was an incredible win.
It is over. It is over. George Foreman is the heavyweight champion of the world.
68 knockouts in those 76 victories.
I don't know if Norton can make it. It might be all over right here.
The impact that the Rumble in the Jungle had on the sports broadcasting industry.
I can remember being shocked that he hadn't gone down.
Ali hanging on behind the head. Foreman hasn't been able to push Ali off and set him up.
And it became one of the most lovely friendships I've ever had.
George Foreman, what an incredible human being, not just in the ring, but outside of it as well.
The world is all right, George. Thank you very much.
It's amazing, isn't it? We think of George Foreman, one of the first things we think about is the fact that he lost in the Rumble in the Jungle. But I know that, Gabby, you were re-watching one of his fights against Joe Frazier.
I couldn't believe it. Honestly, I seen it on Twitter. I was watching it for like 5-6 minutes. The first 2 rounds, how many times he knocked Joe Frazier down?
Yeah,
I think it was six times, wasn't it? But what I loved about that fight, Jeff, was like, I know it's different now and has to be a lot safer, but the ref was like, yep, get back up, Joe. On you go again. Get another one to the head. You're down. Up you come. Go again. Do you know what I mean? How they didn't really like have their guards up, did they? No. It was just like, who's going to have the stronger punch?
And
who's
George had a fearsome punch.
Exactly, yeah. Outstanding fight to watch. And even in that fight as well, right at the start, Joe Frazier was getting the better of him just to start. Then George Foreman just went to another level, didn't he? Outstanding fight to watch.
Yeah.
Legend.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the word legend is used too often, but it's very accurate in the terms of George Foreman, and also with another fella who sadly passed away the weekend. We learned that one of our most iconic journalists and writers in boxing, Colin Hart, had passed away at the age of 89. By the way, Colin wasn't just a boxing writer, because I used to work with Colin when I was a cub athletics reporter, and you could not have met a more informed or pleasant fella who was just interested in helping you all the time. Now, Colin sat down with Gareth A. Davis and Spencer Oliver just last month to discuss his life in boxing. Have a listen.
Colin, final question to you, my friend. Any regrets?
No regrets whatsoever. Given the chance, I'll do it all over again.
And what would an 89-year-old Colin Hart tell that 10-year-old in East London? What advice would he give him today about his life that was ahead of him?
You don't realise how lucky you're going to be.
Well, he was an absolute master of his craft. Big West Ham fan as well, by the way. Joining us for more on both of these great men, boxing commentator Adam Smith. Morning, Adam.
Good morning, Adam.
Morning, Chef. Hi, Gabby. Sad weekend for our sport. Really sad.
Yes, a very sad weekend. Let's start with George Foreman. I mean, look, he fought in the great era of heavyweight boxing with Ali and Frazier and Norton, you know. Does George Foreman, it might sound a simplistic question, does he go down in the list of all-time greats?
He certainly does. George Foreman, arguably the biggest puncher ever. People will say Mike Tyson, maybe Ernie Shavers with a single shot. But I thought Big George was the most ferocious heavyweight of that era, even more so than Sonny Liston, maybe cut from the same cloth. And you know, he was big favourite to beat Ali in the Rumble in the Jungle. And as Gabby was saying about that fight with Joe Frazier, it was extraordinary. You know, lifted off his feet. You know, floored him 6 times in 2 rounds. destroyed Ken Norton. I mean, he was absolutely the guy in form, and Ali, of course, a lot older. So, you know, the rope-a-dope thing, and everyone has known that fight because of Ali's greatest moment. But George was very reflective and funny about it in later life, you know, and how close he was with Muhammad Ali. But he was a brilliant heavyweight, and again, he came again after the timeout when he became a preacher. He then had another shot to run at the world heavyweight title and won it at 45, beating Michael Moorer to become the oldest in history. So, but I remember him, as I think Spencer said on the tributes there, I remember him as a great guy. Spent a lot of time with him when he worked on HBO, and always really friendly, always really knowledgeable, and just, yeah, a great individual, great human being, George Foreman. But yeah, he'll definitely go down as one of the very, very best heavyweights of all time.
When I speak to my dad about boxing back then, he's just like, wow, they were spoiled back then, wasn't you, watching boxing? You know, George Foreman, Ali, Fraser. And was he as feared as you see the clips that say he was, George Foreman?
Very much so. Yeah, he was moody, and he grimaced, and he was menacing, really, and a nightmare to watch. I guess in the modern generation, the more modern generation, Mike Tyson is probably the closest sort of parallel. But like Sonny Liston was, I think Foreman came in and he just had incredible strength, massive hands, huge power. And yeah, he was just not in a very good mood a lot of the time. And then it was funny, actually, because the last sort of 30-odd years of his life were just so fun. He was so fun to be around. You know, his memories of Ali and the Rumble in the Jungle and everything was just, it was so different. Almost like rose-tinted glasses he came through, and he found another life with the lean, mean, fat grilling machines and the commentary and the big smiles. And yeah, and he was then a father, a grandfather, and, you know, a preacher, and he became a different person, I think, through religion. And it was like two totally different parallel universes. Yeah.
I think people forget as well, Adam, you know, you needed courage, as you do now. You needed power, and goodness me, you needed resilience, because world title fights were 15 rounds in those days.
Absolutely. You know, remember the Ali Frazier trilogy. It's extraordinary what they put themselves through, their bodies at that time. And you got to remember as well, they were smaller heavyweights. They weren't these mountains that Tyson Fury and the Klitschko's and those guys are. They're more built like Alexander Usyk, actually. Just that sort of 14, 15 stone type weight, not the 18, 19 stone sort of huge guys you find now. So yeah, and they were skillful too, very fast, and it was an old-fashioned type throwback sport where, yeah, the referees didn't maybe get involved so much, and you let them get on with it a bit more. But yeah, I think health and safety have improved huge amounts over the years, so it's a different type of business now. But yeah, I mean, wonderful memories. And I don't think there'll be a heavyweight era quite like the 70s.
When I seen the ref finally stop it, when I was watching it, I was like, about time.
Yeah. So, and sometimes they did do that. I mean, Jeff, if you'll remember, in the early days we had at Sky of the likes of Tyson and Holyfield and Lewis and Bowe. That was a great era as well then. But I still think the 70s with Ali, Liston, and then Frazier, Foreman, Ken Norton, Ernie Shavers, just some amazing names.
Adam, I was a teenager then. It was just incredible, honestly, just an incredible era. Look, a quick word about Colin Hart as well, who, you know, I was going to say covered boxing for the Sun. That doesn't do it any justice whatsoever. But as I say, I knew him when I was a Cub Athletics reporter, and he helped me greatly in those days. He was just a master of his craft, wasn't he? And a lovely, lovely man.
He's a good friend of mine, Jeff. I spent a lot of time with Colin in the last 20-odd years. We worked on the Boxing Writers Club committee together. I learned so much from him. I think in those early days of being a young reporter, just like you said, I learned from him, from Bob Mee, from Ian Darke, some greats of the sport. And Colin was just always there, always available with his time, so wise, so experienced, a great wordsmith, a fantastic storyteller, and I just enjoyed my time with him. He was a mentor. He was I loved him. I really did, and I really savoured the time sort of later on that I had with him. He was always so lucid. He was always very, very on the ball, and I sort of thought he'd be the sort of guy that would go on forever. But I had a message from him a few days ago, and he was very, just like he said in the interview with Gareth and Spencer, he had no regrets. He was very pragmatic about what was going to happen, and he said he had a wonderful life, both as a career and a personal family life. And huge West Ham fan, big football debates, big boxing debates. A scribe like no other, I think, in the boxing world in the UK, and I will miss him greatly.
We got some quotes in the Sun newspaper this morning. Frank Bruno, when it comes to reporters, no one else will ever lay a glove on him. Rest in peace, my friend. And Lennox Lewis, he wanted to get the truth and tell the truth. He was clearly a leader of the boxing press pack.
He was, exactly that. He was very respected by the fighters. He was honest, he gave his opinion, and if people didn't like his opinion, then fair enough. I remember when Amir Khan got beaten by Bradis Prescott, and we walked to the press room, and he said, he's finished, we'll never see him again. And of course, Amir wanted to prove him wrong and came back and won the world title. But I know he sort of harboured what Colin had said, and he was a very smart guy, and he did have his run-ins with Naz, he did at times, but he was very close to John Conte, very close to Bruno, a lot of the big Ricky Hatton, a lot of the big famous sort of fighters of Britain. But of course, around the world, he was very respected. We remember the likes of Burt Sugar, of Thomas Hauser and Dan Rayfield and people like that today over in America. But Colin was very respected. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame. He will. And you're right, Jeff, that word legend gets touted around way too much. But Colin was. If George Foreman was a legend of the boxing ring, Colin Hart was a legend of boxing writing. No question about that.
Adam, you are so right. Adam, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, mate. Top man.
Boxing losing two real legends. This is talkSPORT Breakfast with me, Jeff Stilling, and Aston Villa's Gabby Agbonlahor. Joining us for more on both of these men is the former Cruiserweight World Champion, Johnny Nelson. Morning, Johnny.
Good morning, Johnny.
Good morning, boys. Good morning, boys. Good morning. Sad weekend for our sport on both fronts. You had two originals for different reasons. George Foreman, an original hard man, tough, a chin like iron. His natural strength, even though his ability and his skill, you looked at his skill, it was so obvious, it was so plain, but accompanied with his natural strength. He, as you saw, he bounced fighters around. He bounced them off when he put hands on them. And unfortunately, at times, I'm glad the clip we just saw there about George, it didn't actually include the Rumble in the Jungle, because that seems to be the one that people just talk about.
Yeah.
So can you imagine being that fighter? They talk about the fight you got knocked out in, and they're actually ignoring the successes, the achievements you did at It turned out he was an amateur boxer. 2 years after turning amateur, won a gold medal. It's never been heard of. At 24 years old, getting in there with Joe Frazier and bouncing him out. Never been heard of. So these achievements alone are massive, and how he dominated the division at one point through natural sheer strength and determination. Yeah. Then the hiatus he went through after getting his heart broken, and he did his head in actually thinking, well, I think it was Jimmy Young was his last fight before he had 10 years out. Came back again. Then when he came back again, the first year boxed 5 times, and the next year 9 times, and the next year 5 times. And the confidence built back up again. At 46 years old, he achieved the impossible, and that was after losing to Tommy Morrison the fight before by knocking out a champion. So what his achievements are really underrated. And he was a no-nonsense kind of guy, and people that know him, when the camera was on, he was all smiles, got the job done. When the camera's off, no nonsense, get out of my way, I'm getting on with the job. He was a no-nonsense kind of guy, and that's why so destructive.
He was much more than just a puncher, Johnny, obviously. But for a guy who, people nowadays may not realise that the heavyweights in those days were, 4 stone lighter than the guys are now. And yet George Foreman had such a powerful punch.
The power, he didn't have the speed, he had the power, he had the toughness. Some heavyweights, they've got the power, but they've not got the chin. Or they've got the chin, but they've not got the power. He had it all. he was naturally strong, and that natural strength was part of his confidence, part of his self-belief. So when things dipped in his career, he has to ask himself questions, and that's why he disappeared for so long. But then once he found himself, found his feet, and really believed in his ability, what he had, that's when he came back to think, I can actually do this. And so the character changed from being the villain in the first part of his career, where he didn't talk, he growled at people, and that was it. When he came back, it was all teeth and smiles. You know, he understood the business. It was show business, so he could do the business as well as perform in the ring.
I couldn't believe how entertaining it was, Johnny, watching that yesterday. Just seeing the clip come on social media of the Joe Fraser fight, and like, fair play to Joe Fraser. He was just getting up after 3-4 seconds. He was like, all right, I'll have some more. Finally, the ref done the right thing and stopped it. Nowadays, that would have been stopped like in the first round, wouldn't it?
Without a doubt. And you look at the era, it's really unfair sometimes when you try and compare fighters of today to fighters of yesteryear. Because fighters of yesteryear, as you said, in 50-round fights, they were surrounded by a bunch of other hard men, Ken Norton, Joe Fraser, all these, they were hard men that could fight for fun, that were honest fighters. They were no-nonsense kind of fighters. And so to try and compare today to yesteryear, it's impossible to do. So then, you know, those fights, you had to be tough, because if you weren't, you're gonna be left by the wayside.
I mean, Johnny, I knew him a little, but you must have known Colin Hart very well indeed. Tell me about your experiences with Colin.
Again, Colin Hart, as I said at the beginning, you've got two originals. Colin Hart was a true journalist, a journalist that did his homework. He didn't pick something up from some second-hand news. He's written that and pick it there. He went and sat down with him. He went and sat down with George Foreman, which I can imagine them both up there, sat there talking about that. He went and sat down with Ali. And even at times, stuff that he didn't report, he went to the homes, got to know these individuals and reported on it. Journalists don't do that today. They'll get second-hand information and then put something together. So you've not got a real report. Colin Hart, when I first started fighting, I thought, this guy don't like me, man, because he's always giving me stick. But he was just a straight talker, a no-nonsense kind of guy. He had no affiliation to anybody. He just said it how he saw it. And this is why he's one. There are none left like Colin. You know, they want to pretend there are none left like Colin. He was a true journalist, a true gen.
Johnny, brilliant. Thank you very much indeed for that.
No problem, boys.
Appreciate it. Thank you, mate.
Boxing losing two real legends in the same weekend.
On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.